Great. Thank you very much. I'm just going to walk through the decisions that need to be made today and some background. And Barry Bragg, the chair of Te Kaha board, is with me because the primary advice is coming from Te Kaha board as well as some staff.
Morena.
So just to reiterate, the decisions that you're being asked to make today are first to receive the report containing the information, and then the recommendations from Te Kaha board. Those recommendations are to improve the overall total budget cost for Te Kaha to 683,165,830, and noting that this is the total budget cost. So it includes the DNC contract price and also the other costs associated with the project. So it's not the DNC contract, it's the total budget price. Noting also, and when Barry speaks to this later, he'll be able to outline this, but it also includes contingency. Then the other recommendations follow on from that, which is about appointing B6 WATPAC delegating authority to the CE, the Chair and Deputy Chair of Finance and Performance, to sign off that contract, and then approve delegations and acknowledge and confirmation from the Crown via the Treasury, read the project assurance point. So the key recommendations, they were in the supplementary paper attachment B. Your decisions today are being based on community views. So those are the community views that you received via the consultation. They're also reflected in the community reviews that you've received on other occasions, investment case, the petition, and then other views that you have heard from the community about different aspects of this. It is also based on the advice from the Te Kaha board, from independent legal advice, from advice around risk insurance, from considerations of the financial impact, and also from other considerations you'll have to make. For example, things such as opportunity costs, sustainability, other issues. So those are all the things that your decisions will be based on today. Just want to touch, and I won't go through this clearly, but just to clarify some misunderstanding that's been circulating around in the media. Council took on the responsibility for this project in March 2020. On taking on responsibility for that project, there were two things. Tony Smell acknowledged one of them. We engaged and brought in key partners into this project, and we actually thank them for their involvement in since then in the project. But also, Council appointed a project board to lead the project. In July last year, there was the first indication of an increase in costs coming through, or sorry, June. In July, you made a decision to try and contain those costs by reducing the seat numbers. But in August, and that was based on a lot of community feedback and advice around economic benefits, you decided to increase and return that seat number to the number that was in the investment case. At the time of making that decision, the report and the advice that was in the public arena, so it was known to the public as well as the council, there were risks associated and cost pressures and a lot of unknowns because of the global situation. I won't read through those, but quite detail about the risks that were associated in terms of price increases resulting from COVID and other international issues, and also around unknown risks. So they were known at the time, and since then the chair of the board in the briefings has advised you of those pressures coming on and which risks were going to be realised. So that since December in particular, there have been warnings from the board around those price increases. It wasn't though until May that the full quantum of that was realised when the submission came in on the DNC contract. And then at that point, Council was received legal advice that it should seek community views before making a increase in the budget. And that I know you as councillors know that this is a requirement that you have under the Act, but sometimes members of the public don't know this, that council decisions are bound by the Local Government Act and other bits of legislation. That legislation says that a local authority must consider in the course of decision making the views and preferences of people likely to be affected and with an interest in the matter. And so that's why you went out to consultation and instructed staff to proceed with that. That consultation started on the 10th of June and went through to the 5th of July. We went out with 3 options, and you'll get a report on the outcome of that consultation. You were briefed about it the other day. It's been in the paper, but we will also have another briefing from the research team from council who did that analysis. So it was done from people that were experienced in analysing that quantum of feedback, but completely neutral as well. In tandem to that consultation, Te Kaha board continued to negotiate with B6 WAPAC and undertake due diligence around both the contract and the costings. And you will be hearing from Te Kaha around that and the details of that today. Also, at the same time, work was done around financial modelling, and again, you'll be hearing about that, and we'll have papers around that, around what the impact that would have on rates and headroom, and also modelling around at which stage in now this new submission costs would be incurred and when the money would flow through, and that is reflected in the modelling that's been done by the CFO. Also, just that you're aware is that council staff and Te Kaha have also responded to a range of information requests. And when I say a range, an overwhelming range of information requests that have come in both from the media and from councillors. So councillors have actually done a lot of due diligence around this as well. So as well as the information that you have had in reports, you have sought further advice, and so just that also the public are aware and you're aware there's been a lot of due diligence done by councillors around this, seeking further advice, further clarity and what have you. And also we do want to even acknowledge the media who have actually made sure the public are aware of this, and through seeking the amount of information they have sought from us, which we are grateful for, because that has meant that the public are informed about the decisions that are being made and are well aware of what's going on. So it has certainly been well traversed, and there's been a lot of due diligence around that. Today we will walk through and give you another chance to reconsider that information that you have received and ask further questions. So what we will walk through today is the consultation report from our research analyst or research team. We will then Te Kaha board and staff and Venues o Tatahi will be able to walk through and provide information around their report and their recommendations. And give some further information. And then we also have the independent insurance manager, who is the insurance manager for Treasury, as well as the board and council, will be available to answer any questions or clarify anything further to what was briefed to you on Tuesday. And we also have the independent legal advice from Simpson Grierson. And then also move on to the CFO giving advice around the financial implications. We've outlined that in detail just again to give you and the public confidence that this work has been checked and the councillors have done their due diligence and actually relied on multiple sources of information before you make your decision, and you have verified the information and got an external experts and advisors to verify this information so that you can have confidence in making whatever decision you come to today. So that's it.
Thank you very much. That's a very good introduction overview of how the day will proceed. So thank you very much. And I'd now like to invite the consultation presentation, Amy Martin, Ashley Hamilton and Chris Jamieson.
Good morning.
Morning.
So what we're going to do now is run you through a summary of what we heard from submitters over the consultation period. We'll start with a bit of demographic information around who we heard from, some breakdown of the results by demographic, and then we'll move into some of the more thematic analysis.
Great. So who did we hear from? Go to the next slide. So the submission timeline, consultation opened on the 10th of June, and we saw an influx of submitters upon opening of consultation. This petered off towards the middle of the consultation and then picked up again towards the end, closing on the 5th of July. So we had a total of 30,575 submissions. Submitters were required to provide their first and last name, an email address or phone number, and their residential address when making their submission. Where these details were not provided, a submission has been deemed invalid and has not been included in the final analysis. Where multiple submissions from an individual were identified, any additional feedback was merged into the first submission received from that submitter, and the additional submissions were removed. Multiple submissions on behalf of a business or organisation were treated the same way. Where submitters own multiple properties and had made submissions on behalf of each property, they were also merged into a single submission for analysis and reporting purposes. Where submitters provided more than one submission with different points of view, they were contacted and asked which one they would like included, and any other submissions were removed. So that meant that 501 submissions were removed, 87 were invalid, and that left us with a total of 29,987 submissions. So looking at the demographic breakdowns of the submitters, we heard from around 6% of under 25-year-olds. This group was underrepresented compared to the city population. Those submitters aged between 25 and 79 years old were overrepresented, and over 80-year-olds were slightly underrepresented. Looking at the gender, we have 58% who identified as a male, 39% who identified as a woman, and 0.5% who identified as non-binary or another gender. Looking at the ethnicities, 88% were New Zealand European, 5.7% were Māori, and 1.1% were Pacific peoples.
So in terms of the geographic breakdown, there's a big table on the left there which you can't see very well in the slide, but it's in the full report. It's just showing that around 87% of submitters were from Christchurch City, 7 were from Selwyn District, 4 from Waimakariri, and then under 1% for the other TAs across Canterbury and the rest of the areas that we heard from. In terms of the ward split, it was actually a pretty good range across the city. There was some who were slightly underrepresented, some who were slightly over, but nothing dramatically different to those city splits. So moving on now to what submitters want us to do.
Great. So overall, 77% of submitters would like to see us invest up to an additional 150 million to enable the project to go ahead as planned. 15% would like the project to stop altogether, and 8% would like to see us pause and reevaluate the project. Submitters from Selwyn and Waimak tended to be more supportive of investing up to an additional 150 million. strong support from other territorial authorities across Canterbury region and the rest of New Zealand to invest up to an additional 150 million. Submitters from Christchurch City tended to be slightly more in favour of stopping the project or pausing and re-evaluating than submitters from the wider Canterbury region and other areas of New Zealand.
And the Christchurch number is just slightly under the number for all submitters at 75%. So this is a bit of a ward breakdown of the results. We've given you an indication in the table as to whether the results were above the city result, below the city result, or around the same. Submitters from the Central, Coastal, Hallswell, Hornby, Riccarton and Waimarie wards tended to mirror the citywide results. Those from Burwood, Fendleton, Harewood, Innis and Papanui tended to be more supportive of the whole sample of investing up to an additional 150 million. Submitters from Banks Peninsula, Cashmere, Heathcote, Linwood and Spraydon wards tended to be the least supportive of investing the up to an additional 150 million. It's worth noting as well that less than half of the submitters from Banks Peninsula think that we should invest that additional money. So Banks Peninsula was significantly below the city result.
So looking at the demographic breakdowns of the submissions we received and the results. So submitters under the age of 24 years and aged between 35 to 49 were more likely to say that we should invest up to an additional 150 million. Beyond here, support tends to decrease with age. Submitters aged between 65 and 79 years and over 80 years were more likely to say that we should stop the project altogether or pause and re-evaluate the project. Submitters who identified their gender as male were more likely to say that we should invest up to an additional 150 million. Submitters who identified as female or non-binary were more likely than males to say that we should stop the project altogether or pause and re-evaluate the project. So the ethnicity breakdowns. Submitters who identified their ethnicity as New Zealand, European, Maori and Pacific peoples tended to be more supportive of investing up to an additional 150 million to allow the project to continue as planned. Those who identified their ethnicity as Asian, Mila, other European and other were more likely than other ethnic groups to say that we should stop the project altogether or pause and re-evaluate the project. Looking at the organisations now. So the majority of organisations at 86% tended to support investing up to an additional 150 million. Positions were particularly prevalent among organisations in the construction, hospitality, events and entertainment, investment and property developers, retail and sports categories. The interest, lobby, industry and community groups tended to have more of a mixed view, and submissions from political organisations and groups fell into the pause and stop categories.
So now we're going to move into some of the thematic analysis which we do from the comments provided by submitters. A bit of context, we did some pre-sorting of these with how we designed the forms. So submitters were sent to essentially 3 versions of the same question to help us pre-filter them. And from there we're able to apply thematic coding to them and provide you with this analysis. So first up, the people who would like to invest up to 150 million to enable the project to continue. It's probably not surprising that one of the big themes here was just get on with it. Just get on and build it without any further delays. There was a feeling from them that further delays will end up costing us more and it isn't going to get any less expensive to build. We're New Zealand's second largest city and we need a world-class arena. There was a sense from these submitters that residents deserve this after the earthquakes and the other disruptive events that have happened in Christchurch over the last decade. They're fed up with missing out on large events because of the shortcomings of the temporary stadium at Addington and the unpleasant experience that provides for spectators. Some have just simply stopped attending events at the Addington Stadium because of the current experience. And they believe that it would help attract people to live and stay in Christchurch would bring employment and vibrancy to the city, and in some cases bring global exposure to Christchurch. They did talk about the financial impacts and funding options. Some recognised that the covered arena would come at a significant cost to the city, but thought that we should proceed and get on with it regardless. Those who addressed the rates impact were prepared to shoulder an increase in rates in order to fund the additional costs, if that's what it takes to get the facility built. But they did provide suggestions on how we could help mitigate the costs, which included selling naming rights, asset sales, ticket surcharges, funding campaigns, and other sponsorship opportunities. Some thought that the government should be approached for a larger contribution, while others suggested that perhaps some sporting bodies could contribute towards the build. There were suggestions about either deferring or diverting money from other projects and purposes, including cycleways and the cathedral. And there was a feeling from these submitters that the facility will be a regional asset, not just an asset for Christchurch, and that they would like to see a contribution from neighbouring TAs who will also benefit, and potentially the wider Canterbury as well. In terms of the benefits that these submitters talked about, they're sick of having to travel to other cities for events and would prefer to spend their money locally, which they can't do at the moment. They feel that it will bring employment opportunities and vibrancy to the city, as I mentioned before, and benefits for many local businesses. They feel we're currently missing out on the economic and social benefits that a facility such as the arena would bring to the city. And there's a sense from some that it will pay for itself over the long term, particularly given the economic and social benefits, which they feel outweigh any long-term debt burden. There's a sense from them we should accept the costs of the project as we do with other council facilities, which are not expected to make a profit, and the key example there was swimming pools and libraries. And some younger submitters pointed out that the arena would be a reason for them and their peers to stay in the city and could be a draw card for others to move here. And again, just that a small number pointed out that the arena will likely bring international exposure for the city. Moving on to the submitters who wanted the project to stop altogether. Again, probably unsurprising that the key reason was the financial impacts. They were concerned about what this would mean and feel that the cost and debt burden associated with the project is just too high to justify. There are questions whether a period of financial and economic uncertainty like the one we're in now was the right time to be embarking on such a large capital project. There was concerns around the impacts on low-income households and that they would likely be hit the hardest by the financial impacts around rates, but attending events at the arena would largely be out of reach for these groups as well. And there were concerns that this would not be the last cost blowout that we see for this project. Some of these submitters said that they just thought the project was a waste of money and the city will end up with a white elephant that sits idle and empty for a lot of time. And there were concerns that it doesn't stack up in terms of return on investment and cost-benefit ratios, with some suggesting that if it was put through a rigorous cost-benefit analysis, the project would not survive the process. There was some feedback around priorities from the STOP submitters. A sense that for many this project isn't a priority and there are other issues, challenges and needs that should be addressed first. The key areas brought up were the basics, things like transport, water infrastructure, community wellbeing projects, health, education, housing. They expressed concerns that some of the ideas that have been floated to help fund the additional investment that will be required, and generally they didn't want to see us selling assets or diverting or deferring funds from other projects to enable this. Some had concerns around the climate change and environmental impacts that the project would have, and there was some comments that perhaps it's incompatible with our climate change goals and commitments. And although it was highlighted as not really being a feasible option in the consultation information, there was still some comments from these submitters that they would like to see us explore upgrading the current Orange Theory Stadium. They also commented on attendance, capacity and location. So there was concerns from these submitters about our ability to regularly fill an arena of 30,000 seats to full capacity, and they noted already declining attendance at events, which they consider as likely to continue as people adjust to new ways of living and consuming entertainment. Some feel that we will struggle to attract major events even with a stadium of 30,000 people, 30,000 seats, and that there's still a need for us to compete for these events. So is there any value in building an arena that, for the sake of a few events each year? There was some acknowledgement that the city does need a new arena from these submitters, but just not the one that we have planned currently. They want us to revisit the overarching purpose and what the city really needs as opposed to the arena that we're building in light of public pressure. They had concerns around the central city location being potentially not the most appropriate place for this development. They were worried that the structure would be dominant and overbearing, particularly in the context of the residential neighbourhood around it. There was also concerns around the transport connections and links and congestion in the area around the planned site. And they highlighted that it may actually end up having a detrimental impact on activation in this area of the city when it's not being used, and probably wouldn't bring day-to-day activation and life to the central city. And finally, our pause submitters. So it's worth pointing out there wasn't as many of these submitters, but there was a lot of breadth in the things that they talked about in their submissions, and you'll notice that as I go through this. Funding and financial implications, again, as with the stop group, was a big one, and they had concerns about the ongoing costs associated with the arena, both the capital and the operational, and that it would represent a further increase to rates at a time where households are already under significant pressure, and there were fears from some that the cost of living in Christchurch could become unsustainable. Many thought that ongoing demands on ratepayers to fund projects such as this was becoming unreasonable, and the council needs to live within its means as ratepayers are required to. There was a sense that ratepayers have been asked for a significant contribution towards a facility that only a few will see benefits from, and there were concerns that the ongoing operational costs, on top of the increased capital costs, and the long-term impact of debt, particularly on rates. There were some who were worried about the opportunity cost of other projects that we may need to forego if the arena goes ahead, and some raised concerns that funding the arena would lead to reduced levels of service in other areas and to services that residents value. There was a feeling that Christchurch ratepayers and residents should not be solely responsible for funding the build of the arena, and again, as with the other group, they'd like to see investment from Greater Christchurch or the wider region, and would also like to see contributions considered from certain sporting groups and organisations who would get benefit from the arena. Some supported a user pays approach as well. In terms of benefits and priorities that these submitters talked about, there were some concerns as to whether the city will see enough return on investment to make the project viable, similar to that stop group, particularly in the context of needing to invest up to an additional $150 million in the project. They want us to revisit the investment case and feel that we should be doing our homework and ensuring that there will be enough benefits, both economic and social, returned to the city and ratepayers to justify any additional investment. They pointed out that there is mounting evidence that points towards arenas and stadia not being sound economic investments, and that it is common for them to lose money, and suggested that perhaps the level of funding should be revisited and funded in some way that is proportional to the benefits that the city is likely to see. They also pointed out that they were concerned that the investment case has not been reviewed in the light of the ongoing costs, and feel that there are other priorities that we would be better to spend that level of money on. Again, primarily back to the basics that I talked about before. There was some sense from some of them that the arena is a luxury item, and there are more pressing issues, needs and challenges that the city is facing, and that investing in that arena would come at the detriment of other projects, activities and services that residents value. There was a lot more feedback from these submitters on the design and design elements, and a desire from some that we should pause and take another look at the overarching purpose of the facility and ensure that we're going to invest in and deliver the facility that the city needs. Again, they felt that there was a need to go back to basics and scale back anything that is a nice to have or non-essential. There were concerns that we were going to end up with a facility that is much bigger than the city really needs, with some noting that they feel it's inappropriate to build an arena of this size for the sake of 1 or 2 events a year, again, similar to that stock group. They feel in some instances that building a smaller arena is more likely to be regularly at capacity would actually lead to a better atmosphere at events, not just the few big ones that we might get to fill the arena each year. There was questions around the value of a full roof, and they feel that the facility could still be successful without this element. They were concerned about the additional costs associated with it, and others highlighted that a lack of a roof is not a barrier to concerts and other similar facilities and stadia around the country. In terms of the uses, timing and location, there were concerns that by trying to provide a multi-use facility that ticks every box, we may end up with a facility that delivers a mediocre experience across a range of uses, and that perhaps we should focus on building an excellent facility for the needs that we have. There were questions from these submitters about the relationship that the arena would have with our other facilities across the city. Te Pai and the Town Hall were some common examples, and whether adding another multi-use facility would essentially be robbing Peter to pay Paul. They were concerned that the needs of some groups were being prioritised more than they should be, particularly when they're not planning on making any financial contribution to the development of the arena. And there was a desire again to reevaluate whether now is the right time to be progressing with this project, particularly in the context that I talked about before. There were questions, could we stage the project? And they suggested that we could focus on delivering what the city needs right now, essentially a live sports venue was their feeling, and that aspects such as a roof and or additional seating could be completed in the future. There were some suggestions that we should reconsider the location, and Lancaster Park was floated by some submitters, but others thought that we should continue to utilise the land and in some cases the existing stadium at Addington. They also had concerns around the ground condition of the proposed site and the visual impact that it would have, again, on the residential neighbourhood around it, connections with transport links and potential conflicts with neighbours. And finally, we've popped this one in here because it was a theme that didn't come up in the other groups as much, and that's taking a South Island approach. So they raised that taking a South Island focused approach and building a facility that would complement the stadium in Dunedin. They feel that having 2 facilities of a similar size and functionality in such close proximity will lead to us competing for the same events and put the success of both facilities in jeopardy, and support taking a South Island view and approach when deciding on the size, scale and functionality of the facility in Christchurch.
Great, so these last few slides will just talk you through some subgroup analysis. That's where we identified some key groups and looked at some key themes that came up in the submissions. So the first group, the Greater Christchurch and Canterbury submitters, there was strong support for investing up to an additional 150 million. They share the feeling that we just need to get on with it and that the region deserves this facility. They highlighted that the longer we leave it, the more it will end up costing, and highlighted that it will be an asset not only for the city but for the wider region. Some submitters indicated that they feel it would be appropriate for the wider Canterbury region to contribute to the costs. That was approximately 11%. Around 36% of submitters from Selwyn and Waimak districts who did not signal that they think other areas should contribute actually reported living in Christchurch City. Those who wanted to stop the project tended to feel that we do not need an arena of the size and scale proposed, and that there would be better uses for both the land and the money. There was reluctance from some of these submitters to contribute financially. Submitters who would like us to pause and reevaluate the project provided a range of feedback, which covered topics such as the financial impact and funding options, the type of facility the city and wider region actually needs, and the need to still pay bid fees to secure large events. Generally, these submitters did not support contributions from outside of Christchurch. Another subgroup we looked at were young people aged between, under 25. Generally, young people were supportive of investing up to the additional 150 million. Submitters between the ages of 18 to 24 were the most likely to support investing up to an additional 150 million out of all age groups. The feedback covered a range of opinions and issues and highlighted that we have missed out on experiencing the large events that venues like this bring to a city. They think that it will contribute to the atmosphere of the city, making Christchurch a more vibrant and exciting place to live. And as with other submitters, there was a strong message that we should just get on with it. From those who thought that we should stop the project altogether, they generally felt that the benefits would not outweigh the financial impact. Some signalled that young people will shoulder most of the financial burden from the debt required to fund the build. And the feedback from young people who thought that we should pause and reevaluate tended to focus on the design and design elements, including the roof and capacity. Those who provided feedback on the size and capacity of the arena tended to feel that we should be developing something even bigger than planned to cater for our future population growth. And then finally, our international submitters. So they echoed what we heard from other submitters who support investing up to an additional 150 million so the project can proceed as planned. They questioned why it was taking so long for work to begin on the arena, and some indicated that they moved away from the city because of how long the rebuild was taking. There was a number who mentioned that Christchurch is their home, and they wanted to see the council make bold decisions and have a strong vision for the future of the city. There was a small number that indicated they were looking at returning to Christchurch and that they would like to see the arena proceed. And it was not clear whether the decision on the arena would have any bearing on their decision to move back to Christchurch, but they did agree that the arena was required to make Christchurch an attractive place to live. That is that.
So that's a bit of a roundup of what we heard. There's a lot more detail in the report, but those are some of the key things that came through quite strongly across multiple groups of submitters in a number of cases.
Thank you. Before I go to questions, and we'll have questions and then we'll break for morning tea, but I just wanted to, acknowledge the extraordinary amount of work that you've done in a relatively short space of time. To deal with that number of submissions, to analyse them and to present them in this way is gratefully acknowledged by members of the council, but also, it really is significant. So my first question, I'm not going to direct to you, I'm going to direct to Helen White, our legal counsel, just to be clear. So we've had, over 30,000 submissions. None of us has had time to read them all. I know that many of us have gone through, quite a few of them to pick up the flavour. But most of us have relied on the report, and I just wanted to know from a legal perspective whether we can rely on the analysis of the submissions just to give us the views and preferences of our communities, our diverse communities, as required by the Local Government Act.
Yes, you are. You are entitled to rely on the very thorough report that the specialist team of officers have prepared for you. There is no practicable way you could read all those submissions. That would take you weeks doing nothing else but that. So the Local Government Act does give you discretion in cases like this, where you've got urgency because of the construction market. This is not a statutory consultation. So in my view, the council is more than competent to make a decision today based on the information that is before you and has been available to you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the submissions team? Jimmy Chen.
Okay, only one question, particularly regarding to the consultation process. But thank you for the comprehensive report. Very good, because if we review demographic, your slides in here, except the New Zealand European, the total population 72%. However, feedback's 88%. Under that, the Maori, Pacific people, Asian, Middle East, and other European, all those percentage of feedback or submitters is less than their percentage population. So how to improve this situation, reflect whether in the future, not now, whether it's possible, because this time we focus on is kind of ratepayer, whether you agree to increase support or not, whether we can focus on ratepayer household only or not, or census, etc. That's for the future, how to improve it.
So I guess one of the big challenges that we have with consultation, I'm not sure if Katie's in the room, is that we do hear from people who are interested and invested in what we are consulting on, so that you have seen some of that here and you can see that coming through in the demographics. In this case, we do have an overrepresentative sample of New Zealand European submitters, and you can see that the other ethnicities are underrepresented. There's ongoing work to improve this, and it is something that we're aware of and are working to improve, but there's still work to be done. I don't know, Lynn, do you want to add anything?
So, Councillor Chen, I think you've raised a really important point. As you're aware, we identified last year that we were not typically getting a representative sample of the community. We have been working with the Multicultural Committee to improve that. And obviously this is another example of where we still have some way to go in order to ensure that there's an adequate representation of all groups in our diverse community.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Just following on from that, how does this compare to sort of when it comes to demographics, to not just to the population, but to our normal consultations?
Yep. So one of the standout ones here is the gender split. Typically we see an overrepresentative sample of females, and males are generally underrepresented. In this case, we have seen the opposite, which has been interesting. The ethnicities align with what we would typically see, and again we have that challenge with young people in the city and them engaging. I think what's really important here is actually the sheer volume of people under the age of 24 who submitted. So there's around 1,700 of them, which is more than we typically see, particularly across our survey program.
But percentage-wise, would that be similar to what we would normally
Similar
get?
to what
Yeah,
we
so it's just the heightened. Yeah, thanks.
I think the last one was around 4%, so similar.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Look, thank you very much, and again, much appreciation for the amount of effort. I know it was kind of day and night and over weekends, so it really is appreciated. It does enable us to make a decision today that you've undertaken all that work, so I hope that you can see that it's been truly valued by your council. So thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you.
And on that note, at 11:25, I will take the morning tea adjournment. And I think I'll just give you 15 minutes because that'll give people time to go and get themselves a cuppa of some sort. So if you'd be back here at 11:40.